The story begins in Miami, where we meet Frank, a former special operations agent who now works as a professional driver. As he prepares for a job, a woman approaches him, asking for help with her broken-down car. Frank refuses, saying he's running late. She then threatens him with a gun, forcing him out of the vehicle. At that moment, her accomplices intervene to steal the car, but they can't start it because it's encrypted and requires a startup code. They decide to force Frank to give them the code. Frank stops them, asking them to wait so he can take off his jacket because his suit is freshly pressed. He then engages them in a fight and defeats them all. The woman, terrified, drops the gun and runs away. Frank then enters the startup code, drives off in the car, and rushes to make his appointment on time. Frank arrives just as the clock strikes 3 p.m. School lets out, and a young boy named Jack gets into the car to be driven home. Although Frank isn't a regular driver, he accepted this job as a favor for an acquaintance. Jack is also the son of an important man, the head of the DEA, so the job pays well. It's clear Jack likes Frank a lot and has grown attached to him. Frank then drives to the villa of Jack's father, Jeff. He notices Jeff arguing with his wife, Audrey, so Frank stops the car a distance away so Jack won't see his parents fighting. Audrey comes to take her son, and Jack tells her everything that happened with Frank during the drive. Audrey tells Frank they're upset because he'll only be working for them for a short while. Frank lets her know he's not used to jobs like this, but he'll miss Jack. She thanks him for preventing Jack from witnessing the argument, especially since she's going through a tough time with Jeff, which is affecting their son. Frank wishes her well. Finally, she asks if he can take Jack to his doctor's appointment tomorrow at 9 a.m. instead of her, as she'll be busy preparing for his birthday party. Frank agrees and leaves. Strangely, Jeff's house is under remote audio and video surveillance. The person monitoring them informs someone else about Jack's doctor's appointment. We are then introduced to Gianni, a dangerous international criminal who is surveilling Jeff's house. His assistant learns the appointment is at 9 a.m. Gianni orders his men to prepare the mission equipment, a dangerous virus. He gives it to his right-hand man, Dimitri, to inject into Jack. Gianni keeps the antivirus antidote in his own safe. That night, Frank sees a news report about a major conference of drug enforcement agencies, attended by Jeff, the conference chairman. Frank orders a pizza for dinner, but is surprised when Audrey shows up at his apartment. She is drunk and barely conscious, trying to get close to him. Frank refuses, telling her what she's doing is wrong, but he understands her situation. When he walks her to her car, Audrey thanks him for his chivalry and respect toward her in her vulnerable state. The next day, Johnny's men arrive at the building housing the doctor's clinic, led by Lola, Johnny's ruthless lieutenant. She asks the nurse about the doctor, claiming it's an emergency. When the nurse informs the doctor, Lola kills her without hesitation and also kills the doctor. Dimitri hides the bodies in a storage room. At the same time, Frank arrives at the hospital with Jack. Frank tries to reassure Jack, who is afraid of getting a shot, telling him he'll be right there. When they reach the clinic, we discover Lola has taken the nurse's place. Frank asks her about Dr. Coplin, and she tells him the doctor is sick and needed 2 days off, and there's a replacement doctor now. Frank doesn't suspect anything. We see Dimitri is the replacement doctor. Jack says he wants Dr. Coplin. Dimitri tells him the doctor has an emergency outside the clinic. Frank is puzzled because this contradicts what the nurse said. Furthermore, Dimitri refuses to let Frank stay with Jack, claiming only the patient is allowed. At that moment, Frank gets a call from his friend, Detective Turconi, who was supposed to pick him up from the airport after the appointment. Frank is surprised to see a large man heading toward the vaccination room and is even more shocked to see blood coming from under a door nearby. He quickly goes to the vaccination room and demands they not vaccinate Jack now, but they refuse. Frank fights them to stop them before getting Jack out of the room, but they overpower him and violently restrain him. As soon as he gets outside, the psychotic Lola is waiting for him and starts shooting at him with her pistols. Frank hides, quickly grabs an oxygen tank, releases its contents, and ignites it, causing an explosion that engulfs the entire floor. The lighting becomes very dim, and in the chaos, Lola accidentally shoots the large man. Only Dimitri remains. Meanwhile, Frank and Jack try to escape. Lola alerts the man downstairs to take action. He quickly plants an explosive device under Frank's car. Frank and Jack reach the car and speed away just as Lola comes down and continues firing at the car, but they've already escaped. A police car arrives and contacts Gianni to execute the backup plan. Lola then kills the officers. On the other side, Jeff and Audrey are preparing for the birthday party. As soon as Frank arrives, he gets a call from Johnny, who tells him that if he doesn't follow instructions, Jack will be killed, and that the bulletproof glass of his car won't stop the snipers. Audrey, Jack's mother, watches from a distance, confused about what's happening. Gianni tells Frank that someone will come to him and must be led into the car. That person is Lola. After she gets in, she threatens to kill him if he tries anything. Johnny orders him to move immediately. As soon as the police arrive, Frank speeds off in the car, driving at top speed through city streets with police cars chasing him everywhere. Using his exceptional skills, Frank manages to evade them, with new patrol cars appearing until he finally loses them. Meanwhile, the FBI arrives at Jeff's house and informs him that the driver might be involved in the kidnapping, but Audrey doesn't believe it because she knows Frank well. The officer informs them that Frank is a dangerous person, being a former special operations agent. On the other side, Frank arrives at the location Lola gave him. She orders him to exit calmly. He finally meets Gianni, who says he thought Frank was just a driver but now sees he's no different from them. They ask Frank why he kidnapped Jack. Frank takes Gianni's phone, calls Jeff, knowing the police are with him, and demands $5 million be delivered to a specified location. He threatens to send pieces of Jack if his demands aren't met. Frank isn't convinced they're doing all this just for a ransom. Gianni then tells Frank he's impressed with him and will let him live. At that moment, Frank sees the reflection of a bomb under the car in a puddle of water and realizes he'll die if he drives away. He fires a warning shot at Gianni to make him move, then drives off at full speed. With professional skill, he manages to detach the bomb at the last moment, causing it to explode in the air and saving himself. He then calls Jeff to tell him he had nothing to do with kidnapping Jack, but they don't believe him. The police manage to locate him, but when they arrive, they only find the phone. Frank calls from another phone to warn Turconi that he needs to leave the house quickly. Turconi doesn't understand, but the police arrive and arrest him. Frank then calls Audrey, who pretends to be talking to a friend. Frank tells her he had nothing to do with kidnapping her son, and that it's not about ransom because the gang tried to inject Jack with poison at the clinic. He promises to return her son to her. At the police station, an officer asks Turconi why he didn't tell them earlier that he's a detective. Turconi explains he was intimidated by the number of officers and that he isn't extremely close with Frank. The officer is surprised that Turconi was cooking at his house. Turconi explains he's French and they like to cook, unlike in America. On the other side, we see Frank has reached the clinic building. He sneaks into the surveillance room to get footage of the gang's entry and successfully downloads an image of Dimitri from the system. He then leaves the clinic via the elevator without being seen. As soon as he goes back to the clinic, he finds the syringe they dropped. But the police suddenly appear and open fire on him. A bullet hits the syringe, breaking it. Frank fights the officers, subdues them, takes another available syringe, and quietly exits the building. Meanwhile, Jeff, under close police surveillance, goes to drop off the money as agreed. Frank calls Turconi, who pretends to be talking to his mother. Turconi tells Frank the police respected him once they found out he was a detective, but they're waiting for confirmation from France. Frank asks him to use any computer to send him a photo of a person to search for. Turconi identifies him as a Russian virology specialist and also finds his address. Frank immediately goes to Dimitri's apartment. Dimitri was preparing to leave the apartment, and as he exits, he encounters Frank. He shoots at Frank to disable him and escapes down the emergency stairs. Frank chases him relentlessly from one place to another until Dimitri boards a bus and gets away. Frank then performs a crazy maneuver, jumps onto a jet ski, and continues the chase. This time in the water, keeping his eyes on Dimitri. As he gets close to the bus, he jumps from the water onto the pier. He then boards the bus to catch Dimitri and asks why they wanted to inject Jack. When Dimitri doesn't answer, Frank injects him with the syringe he took. Dimitri is terrified because he knows the syringe contains the virus and quickly leaves to get the antidote. On the other side, the police are puzzled because Gianni hasn't taken the money yet. Audrey is frustrated because they can't make any progress, but suddenly they get news that Jack has been found, locked inside a car. They decide to open it with a robot device, fearing a trap, but the device malfunctions. The officer tells her they'll replace the device, but Audrey, tired of waiting, decides to go out and open the car herself. To their surprise, Jack is indeed inside and in good condition, but they are being watched by Gianni. At the same time, Dimitri arrives at a large lab to get the antidote, with Frank tracking him the entire way. Dimitri goes to the lab director to meet the doctor, but is told he's busy. Frank then sees people asleep on beds, subjects of experiments to develop the virus. Suddenly, a very large, ferocious man attacks Frank to finish him off. The difference in strength is clear, but Frank fights back with powerful punches, to no avail, until he lures the man onto a boat. Frank cleverly exploits the man's weakness and defeats him in his own way. Dimitri goes to the doctor who developed the virus and tells him he was injected with it and needs the antidote. The doctor tells him not to worry because it hasn't activated in his body yet. Dimitri then threatens the doctor to open the fridge, which contains only 2 vials, one for him and one for the director. Dmitri is forced to kill the director to take his vial. At that moment, Frank enters and reveals that he injected Dmitri with water, not the virus. Before Dmitri can kill him, Frank kills Dmitri and also knocks out the doctor before escaping. Frank wants to understand everything about the virus. The doctor explains it's genetically modified, contagious, and if the infected person doesn't take the antidote within 24 hours, they will die. Furthermore, if they breathe on someone, that person will be infected immediately. When Frank demands the antidote, the doctor throws the vials out the window. Frank jumps after them to catch them, but in the end, they fall from his grasp. He tries to stop one of the passing cars and manages to grab it at the last moment before it gets run over, thus securing the antidote for Jack. At that time, the doctor examining Jack tells them he has a minor infection, but is stable. Jeff promises his wife he'll make up for the lost days after the conference. Then, Jeff coughs as if he has an infection himself. A moment later, Audrey receives a call from Frank. She pretends to be talking to a friend because police officers are present, but Frank has already sneaked in. He shocks her by revealing Jack was injected with a contagious virus, and the cure is the antidote he has. She is confused about why they would do this. Frank explains the target is her husband Jeff, because he will be attending his conference of regional drug enforcement agency heads, making it easy to eliminate them all. Now, Frank must reach the beneficiary who has more doses of the antidote in case anyone else gets infected. At that moment, one of the officers sees a broken door and alerts the others. As soon as they step out, Frank ambushes them, causing chaos. Meanwhile, Jeff arrives at the conference venue. Audrey calls to warn him, but he doesn't hear her because he's in an underground level before going up to the conference. The infection he caught from Jack begins to affect him. On the other side, Frank calls Turconi for help in locating Gianni. Turconi tells him Gianni is connected to drug cartels in countries near the US. Turconi manages to find information about him on his computer, including his address. Frank flags down a taxi on the road to go to Gianni. We then cut to Jack, whose condition is stable, but Audrey can't withstand the infection and collapses. Jeff also falls ill and is taken to the hospital. Gianni decides to keep the remaining antidote in his own bloodstream to protect it from theft or damage. As happened before, suddenly, Frank storms the place to settle the score with Gianni, but Gianni's men keep firing at the taxi until they run out of ammunition. Frank and the taxi driver have already escaped quickly. Gianni's men then surround Frank, and a fierce fight breaks out between them. Frank uses his usual speed and world-class special ops training to take them down and gain control. The taxi driver is happy with his new car. As he leaves the garage, he encounters two men who threaten him with weapons, but Frank attacks them with a fire hose. He deals with each gang member who appears until none are left. He then goes to Gianni to kill him, but Gianni tells him, "You came for the antidote? The antidote is now in my blood. If you kill me, everyone you know who's infected will die." Frank asks him the real reason for all this. Gianni replies that it's not personal. He works for whoever pays more, and the Colombian drug cartel hired him to eliminate their rivals. At that moment, the psychotic Lola appears with her weapons to help Gianni escape to his plane, but Frank dispatches her with a single move, in the manner she deserves. Frank takes a Lamborghini to chase Gianni before he escapes. He drives at maximum speed, keeping his eyes on the helicopter. Gianni lands near the plane that will take him to Colombia. Frank continues chasing him at top speed, and, with a crazy maneuver, manages to catch up to the plane just before his car explodes. Gianni thinks he's finally escaped, but suddenly Frank appears, kills the co-pilot, and as soon as Gianni sees him, he draws his gun and tells him to sit down so they can get acquainted. Frank flips the table and attacks him violently. Gianni accidentally kills the plane's pilot, causing the plane to lose balance. Nonetheless, the fight continues between the two, each trying to overpower the other until the plane crashes into the ocean. After a while, Frank searches for Gianni, who surprises him and tries to strangle him with all his strength, but Frank delivers the knockout blow. He puts a life vest on Gianni and brings him to the surface because, of course, Gianni's life is important due to the antidote in his blood. A few days later, Frank visits Audrey's family after they've received the antidote. He sees them happy, but chooses not to go in. He gives the flowers he brought to the nurse to take inside for them. He then goes to take his friend Turconi to the airport. Before Turconi leaves, he thanks Frank for the trip, during which he didn't see a single good day, and they say goodbye until the next vacation. As Frank gets into his car, he receives a new job request and agrees to take it. And here, the story of the film ends.